Great, it's my pleasure to introduce the second session, and I'll introduce Holly Samuelson, who's going to be hosting that session. She's assistant professor in the Department of Architecture at the GSD, transitioning seamlessly into that position after her graduation from the DDes program in 2013, I believe. She teaches courses on energy and environmental performance of buildings, which is her research, looking at the computerized building performance simulation, occupant behavior, and future building practices as it relates to these topics. She's published numerous peer-reviewed papers in journals such as Building and Environment or the Journal of Building Performance Simulation. Prior to joining the GSD as a DDes student, she practiced architecture and was a sustainable design consultant for about 8 years. So please welcome Holly Samuelson.
Thank you. It's an honor to be among this group. And it's an honor to introduce Alvin Lam. He's a managing director of international markets at Ginnie Mae, the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development in Washington, D.C. He specializes in housing finance and sustainable urban development. His current responsibility is developing and implementing global strategic partnerships with the financial and investment industry, involving Ginnie Mae stakeholders with direct and indirect decision-making authorities to the $1.7 trillion Ginnie Mae securities. Dr. Lam served as Director of International Research at HUD from 2002 to 2013. In 2001, he managed the U.S.-China Housing Initiative, a presidential bilateral collaboration between HUD and the Chinese Ministry of Housing and Urban-Rural Development with focuses on finance and building technology. He developed international collaboration projects with the United Nations Habitat Program, the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, and the governments of Mexico, Canada, Uganda, and Korea, just to name a few. He served in the U.S. delegation of the UN Habitat Governing Council, UN Commissions on Sustainable Development, UN Commission for Population, and multiple World Urban Forums. Since 2010, Dr. Lam has actively participated in the Energy Working Group within the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation and has served on the U.S. delegation to multiple governments on low-carbon city projects. Thank you for joining us, Alvin Lam.
Thank you. It's truly an honor to be here. It has been 30 years. It's a very long process for me. And the main reason I'm coming back is to thank the faculty and my fellow students, classmates, and also the staff member at the DDes program who actually built these institutions that had a great impact to my career, my life, and my thinking process of the projects I have to get involved. So I appreciate that opportunity. The topic I present to you is representing the important context of design. The interpretation of design is, in my view, I think we have discussed a lot, is more on the management, planning, coordination, and implementation side. Maybe I can trace back to, rewind back to 30 years, how I get the concept of a DDes doctoral design program and the concept of design. That was 30 years ago. 30 years ago, I flew back with Professor Dana Tomlin from California. And we were just finishing up the Lincoln Institute program. And then we took the red-eye flight, returned back to Boston. And when we approached Boston, the sun came out, and we both half sleep and half awake. Then I started generating some conversation with Professor Tomlin. And I remember I saw the program called Doctor of Design. So I asked him the question, what is this program about? And he suddenly woke up and got very excited and started talking to me about DDes program. Spent the last 30 minutes about the DDes program. So try to explain to me what is the DDes program, what it's all about. But I told him that I have no design background. I don't know how to even do sketches on the house. So I have no idea, how do you get a doctoral degree from on design. So he tried to explain to me what is design, the context, and the program was designed for professionals that you want to go back to your field and then you enhance your fellow professionals. So I decided to give it a try. So that's how I got in the DDes program without knowing anything about the design sketch of a house or a city or a landscape or anything about that. And background is urban planning and economics. Well, since then, design has been really in my career. That's is more, as I mentioned, is more on the management, planning, coordination, and implementation. It's very important, especially in the public sector. Today, I want to explain to you or tell you about the work I am involved in right now, and the agency that I got involved is called Ginnie Mae in the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Ginnie Mae. Before I go too far, like any federal official, I have to explain that this is my personal view, not representing the view of my agency or the government. So I'm now getting free to talk right now. No recording. I don't know how many people heard about Ginnie Mae. Ginnie Mae is probably quite unknown to the field, or any field. You probably heard of Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and those big institutions that got involved in the financial crisis back to 2007, 2009. Well, Fannie and Freddie are private institutions, companies that they support by the government, but they are private. Well, Ginnie Mae is a government agency here. Ginnie Mae is actually a corporation within the Department of Housing. It's a federal agency, but it's running as a corporation. Our main function is to provide a major guarantee to the mortgage-backed securities. That means the major mission is to channel actually the global capitals into the low and moderate income housing market in this country. It's quite a very unique organization that you can actually bring the global and those domestic investments into the low and moderate income housing market, and that's the mission of HUD and also the mission of Ginnie Mae. And how do you do that? And I can explain to you a little bit more. Since the inception, Ginnie Mae has attracted more than $6 trillion of capital into the low and moderate income housing in this country. You probably don't know much about that. 3 trillion of the 6 trillion was actually attracted after the financial crisis. We grew quite rapidly after the financial crisis, and $3 trillion created, helped more than 16 million families to purchase their home on the low and moderate income. I have only like 3 slides, but probably I just use 1 slide just to show the color, because government is not too fancy to talk about it. So I showed some color over here, so I may change different slides, but just support my conversation. Well, since the financial crisis, Ginnie Mae has grown almost 3 times. It is established in 1968. It's 50 years ago we established this institution. It's a corporation within a government. So most of you probably didn't believe that the federal government actually has some unique system over there or being creative. But there are pretty smart people. I think you will hear the next few speakers. There are smart people in the federal governments that they build these systems. Actually, 50 years ago, we're going to celebrate the 50th anniversary pretty soon. That is unique institutions that can actually bring the investors money to help the low and moderate income families. I'm glad to see the Janie's slide that's showing the housing shortage in Hawaii, and that's the mission that HUD has been trying to help. Although the demand is very strong, so we continue to work together to help the local to provide more housing for low-income people as well as the homeless. Well, most of I just want to explain a little bit mechanicals of the Ginnie Mae operation. Most of the home buyers that they have their mortgages. So private companies securitize these mortgages, and then we put a guarantee on that. Guarantee means the government label that if the investors has any issues with the bonds, the securities, that the government we will pay the investors. So with that kind of government guarantees, you attract certainly a lot of private investors. I think that's a very important role for the government that takes certain risk and to bring the private sector into the marketplace. Well, today, as Holly mentioned, about Ginnie Mae has grown to $1.7 trillion outstanding. That means we actually has $1.7 trillion of private capital flowing into the mortgage market to help the low and moderate income. To give you a scale of $1.7 trillion, we had a conversation with an ambassador from Korea that we mentioned about our work, our performance. Then he thought about it and he said, oh, the Korea's GDP was 1.4 trillion. So that shows you the 1.7. And also the scale of looking at the Ginnie Mae's operation, 1.7 trillion. I mentioned about previously that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, those two private institutions. Fannie Mae is probably twice as big as 1.7 trillion. Freddie is about the same, about the same as Ginnie Mae, 1.7 trillion. Fannie Mae has a staff of 7,000 people, and Freddie has 6,000. Can anyone guess that how many people that Ginnie Mae has? $140. With that scale, 140 people. Last year, for example, we provide a guarantee. We generate provide a guarantee. Then we actually generate $2 billion of revenue just last year because we provide guarantee the investors pay certain premiums, so we accumulate our revenue. So last year's we broke the record. The revenue was $2 billion. If we were a private company with 140 people, each of us would get a bonus of $14 million last year. That's very wishful thinking. So we turn every penny back to the Treasury. I hope we can get a tax deduction from that. Not a penny. We still need to pay high income tax. It is truly working with a very outstanding group at Ginnie Mae with so little staff and operating such a big operation. That came back to one of the first lessons learned from Professor Carl Steiners on the day of the orientation. He said that you are all came from the top of your class from different states or country, that you are all number one. You came over here. Then you won't be able to be the number one anymore. So because you are all good, you are at the top. So that's why we are same thing. That I learned that lesson. When you work in a very outstanding group of people, you don't want to be the number one. You want to be continue to be the best. That's how the lesson number one I learned from a DDes program from Professor. So thank you, Carl. Too bad he's not here. I was hoping to see him over here. My work at the Ginnie Mae is engaging on the international side of the investors. Among the 1.7 trillion, we're estimating probably 300 to 400 billion dollars are from the foreign investors. So my job is to engage these investors to make sure they understand our program. So when you sit down with these big investors with $20 billion, $40 billion of holding in our securities, you learn how to engage with them. The lessons I engage with them is to be humble and to be transparent. So that's actually another lesson I learned from DDes program, that you are the best, but you have to be able to work with people, that you are the top already. And that was Professor Dobo that who mentioned about that when we took his class, that he was suggesting that you should help other classmates not to be showing off you're the number one. You have to help. So the way we help other people is to make it more successful is to help other people. To help other people can make yourself more successful. So that's my lesson 2 from the DDes program. There are many lessons I can talk about, but I have only like 30 seconds left. Well, Ginnie Mae is a remarkable business model. Told me to stop. it's a government bureaucracy, but we have to work with the efficiency. And that's important, that wherever you go, that work with your, be very effective. I think DDes program provide me a lot of disciplines and training on that. So I really am glad to see that the DDes program has grown so much, so much diversified at this point. So really congratulations. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Lam. Next, Luciana Birdie is an architect and planner with almost 20 years of experience working and managing design and construction projects. She's the Deputy Director for Capital Programs and Environmental Affairs for the Massachusetts Ports Authority, or Massport. In her role, Dr. Birdie is leading the shift of capital programs towards a more innovative, progressive, BIM and design technology-driven department, one adopting lean construction principles and concepts. Prior to joining Massport, she held several positions at the Division of Capital Asset Management and Maintenance, DCAM, for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Dr. Birdie is a member of the Construction Management Association of America National Board of Directors and the chair of its Emerging Technologies Committee. In 2015, she received the Construction Management Association of America's National Award in New Technologies. In addition to her DDes degree, she holds a master's degree from the Istituto Universitario di Architettura di Venezia in Venice, Italy. And she was a fellow with a special program in urban and regional studies at MIT. Dr. Birdie is highly involved in the Italian-American community. We are happy to have you, Luciana Birdie.
I hate talking to the dark, so sorry. So it's easier. So which, either way, either one?
I think either one.
Either one. Okay, great. Thank you. So I'm going to try to look at your board so I'll see, because I can talk for hours. So I was asked to talk about design, and I will touch upon everything that I will be talking today really came from my research at the DDes. So including, what now I define as lean construction. At that time was, I didn't even know that I was doing lean, but I was actually, then showed that was helping me to become a better architect and also a better manager in some sense. So design for me, in my role, my real world role, it's a necessity and it's a way to address real challenges. So before I talk, here we go. I don't know how many of you know what Massport is. We own, manage, and operate 3 airports: the Logan Airport, the Hanscom Fields, and the Worcester Airport, and you can see them in the left side here. Then we also own, manage, and operate our maritime facilities, so the Conley Terminal, the cruise port, the seafood, and the Boston Autoport, and we own bunch of real estate in South Boston. So we do of construction $500 million a year. So we usually manage a little bit more than $1 million a day in construction. Our necessity in design came when I talk about design, I talk about an answer to problems. So the problems that Massport is facing now are our airlines. So our growth. We, as you well know, especially Logan, our site, it's very tiny, and one of the benefits is that we are in the city. But the problem is that airlines are growing. We are getting, between 2014 and 2016, we had 14 new international airlines. And just in the first 3 months of 2017, we added another 3, and we are continuing growing. This is, you see the growth of passengers. We reached the 36 million passengers a year, and you could see that from 2009, we were hoping to get 36 million passengers in 2021. So we are actually growing faster than we were planning, and our strategic plan was actually mentioning. Same things is happening in maritime. So you see that there is huge volumes on maritime facilities, and we are actually working with the Army Corps of Engineers to continue to dredge our port so that we can get bigger and faster ships. So what is really design? when we talk about design, we always hear, oh, we cannot afford a good design. But we really don't understand what is the real cost of bad design. And when I say design, I don't talk about beauty. I don't talk about how beautiful a building is, but how it actually really works. Because in reality, I think Evan mentioned it earlier, in the 50 years, the manufacturing has increased the productivity. Construction has not. And when I talk about construction, I talk about design and construction. So we like to, and design, it's both beauty, it's both what we see, but also how we operate and how we manage whatever we are within. So for me, design, it's really a link between creativity and innovation. And when we talk about creativity, we talk about the generation of new ideas. This is something that we can rarely improve and make more efficient. But when we look at innovation, it's how we actually make that work, how we make that happen. And that is where my work and focus has been. Innovation, we look about new technologies, but also about new processes. We can use technologies, we can use BIM, we can use VDC, we can use Revit, but if the process does not get better, we still waste, because there is a lot of waste in what we do every day. So it's not about making beautiful building, but it's about how these buildings work, if they work or if they don't work. And when I say work, it means the answer to the customer need. And for us, Massport, the customer are the passenger. So we use innovation, like new technology, and we use also new processes. And here I try to bring in lean construction. How many of you know what lean construction is, have been using lean construction? Can you raise your hand? 4 people, and probably most of them work in the public sector. So the lean construction, it's in 2 words, is the Toyota production system applied to construction. It's looking at the process, looking at the value, finding the waste, and try to eliminate the waste. This is my short version of what lean construction is. So what I'm doing at Massport, what I've been doing also at the DDes, it's look at BIM and lean together. Technology by itself cannot improve process, cannot increase efficiency in what we do. But if we look at the process, then we have. So on one hand, we have BIM and VDC, virtual design and construction. On the other hand, we have lean construction, which is a specific approach to communication and collaboration. So on one hand, we are using innovative technology, and on the other hand, we look at people and processes. So together we can maximize really BIM to get the project to be done. So design needs to inform decision making. We are architects. I'm an architect. I like designing. But before we design, what I tell my architect, my big ACOM, Gensler, and PB, and whoever wants to come and work with me, say, you need to stop. You need to say, what are you trying really to design? You need to come to us, your customer, go to the airline, go to the passenger. So I define the condition of satisfaction. Before you try to put pen on paper, or builders, Suffolk like to build. You say, what are you building? Why are you building? What are we trying to achieve? So we do every project has what we define the condition of satisfaction. We sit down and we'll say, we have a large meeting, I think Janine explained it earlier, and we'll say, what are we really trying to know? What does success means for you? And the airlines is a different perspective that we do, and the architect wants to make money, right? And we don't care about how much money the architects make. We care that our passenger has the best experience ever. So we, obviously, the condition of satisfaction has to be smart. And I try to be very regimented on what we do. So this is, again, back to lean construction. So let's see how many of you, probably all those people that know what lean construction is knows. How reliable is our construction? And when I say construction, 5 minutes. Construction, design, and construction. How reliable is what do we do every day in our offices, what the previous panel does every day? 54%. PPC, it's percent plan complete. It means that 54% of what we promise gets done. Why? Not because we are inefficient, because the task that was done. People didn't give you something that they were supposed to give it to you. Something didn't happen before. It doesn't matter. If you look at the process, still a big waste. So there are some tools that we are using it, and this is something, I'm going to go fast, but this is something that I developed in 2014. So the first step we do, we look at, again, like I said earlier, we map the condition of satisfaction. We'll sit down all together, we define. Then we look at BIM and lean, and I'm saying, okay, what tools do I have in my toolbox of BIM, VDC, and lean construction that can help me achieve these goals? The ultimate goal is to achieve the condition of satisfaction. If we have in mind that that is the goal, that is what makes a project a success, then I have to look at what tools I have in my toolbox on BIM and lean that make me achieve that. So I use A3, trade modeling, the blue is the BIM, and then the green is the lean construction tools. So we look at tool. The other things that we don't usually do, look at constraints. What is coming down the street that came from other projects that stopped you and did not allow you to develop, to deliver the project? So we try to highlight that early enough and to develop. And we kind of structure these in what we call the BIM execution plan content. So this is just a little, I developed, I love to make charts and write books. So this is on our website. We developed our roadmap for BIM implementation. We rewrote our contract. Again, we are the public sector, so we have to be so anal in all of this stuff. But what I think the result is a beautiful facility. If you go in Terminal E, Terminal C, the new garage, you'll see the design. You can see the resolution of the design because of using more efficient processes, which means it makes you, architect, focus on design more than focus on what makes you waste the time. So this is something else that we use. This is, I don't know how many of you, this is laser scanning. We had this piece of prefab that fell between the new garage and the old garage. So the use of technology, if we did not have laser scanning, we did this in like 20 minutes. If we did not have laser scanning, we will have spent weeks, 1 minute, we will have spent weeks to survey what is the location of that piece of precast and what is the damage done. So what did we do? We sent a laser scanning crew. They surveyed, and then because we had, you can see the piece that fell. The right side is the existing garage. The left side is the new garage. And what we did, because we had a previous laser scanning, we basically overlapped it to laser scanning to see if there was a structural damage. This was done in a matter of 3 days. Now, this is what I say about efficiencies. That's how we are going to we are using technology to improve the process. So, and this is, again, from the laser scanning. We are using laser scanning for all our facility. On top of that, if we move, we also have to look internally at our processes. Government, it's a heavy monster, okay? So, because we have to be. And I love government because we are restricted amongst our regulation. But if we want to be efficient, if I'm asking you, architect, to be efficient when you work with me, I also have to look how I can be better, more efficient when I have to interact with you. This is not a one-way street. So we are looking and improving our internal processes, starting from a project level approach, going from the program up until the department. So we are really restructuring the whole department to make us more efficient. This is, again, it's a very structural way to look at our processes, a timeline. And, we work on working group. This is, again, coming from the value stream mapping and the lean construction and the lean Six Sigma process that we are implementing. We look at every leader process, and we did subgroup. We basically put within the major process, we highlighted what are the sub-processes, and we worked on these. We basically use the sticky. I go around with sticky. We say red if it needs a lot of improvement, yellow if it needs a little improvement, but still needs improvement. And this is this is the work that we are going to be doing in the next few months to improve again our internal processes. So at the end, what I'm saying is that design is not, this is my last slide. Design is, we need to listen. The whole design process, design and processes, technology and innovative process needs to listen. The goal of a designer is to listen, to observe, to understand, all before we actually start to put pen on a paper and to make the invisible visible. So I would love to talk to you later, and I am all set. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Birdie. Next up, Lee Min Hee is Director of Research at Singapore's Center for Livable Cities, a nexus and knowledge center for livable and sustainable cities, where she focuses on research strategies, content development, and international collaborations. She played similar leading research roles at the National University of Singapore School of Design and Environment, as well as at the Center for Sustainable Asian Cities and the Asia Research Institute. Known for her insights in city solutions, technologies, and design, she has been a sought-after keynote speaker, moderator, facilitator, and panelist at international symposia and events, like ours. She's recognized as an outcome-oriented thinker, implementer, and influencer who is able to motivate and inspire. Dr. Hee's individual research focuses on urban livability and sustainability and their agenda for architecture, urbanism, and public space. Her work on cities has been widely published, including in international referee journals and architectural reviews. Recent book publications include Constructing Singapore Public Space and Future Asian Space. In addition to her DDes degree, she obtained her Master of Arts in Architecture, as well as her professional degree in architecture, for which she received top honors from the National University of Singapore. Welcome back to the GSD, Lee Min Hee.
Thanks for the booster seat. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks to Peter and Martin for inviting me. I must be one of the 11 dots working in government. And just a small preface before I start my presentation. I'm happy to report that, more than 10 years after my working on my dissertation in the DDes program, I finally published my book with Springer, Constructing Singapore Public Space. My advisor was Peter Rowe, and I had Margaret Crawford and Hashim Sakis in my committee. The DDes has been a life-changing experience for me in more ways than one. So I gave my book to my current boss, and unhappily to report, he said that the only thing he found readable in it was Peter's foreword. And so I realized that for the work that I'm doing right now, which is very much research for actionable outcomes, I had to revamp a lot the kind of language and vocabulary I use in my work, because we work a lot of mayors with city leaders and government agencies, and they had no time for epistemology and frameworks and stuff like that. So, okay, so here goes my presentation. So I came from halfway around the world, so I think I have to give you a little introduction about the work I do. And maybe like Alvin, I should say that none of what I'm saying is the view of the Singapore government, it's my own. And so Singapore is quite known now for being a global city. We have a population of about 5.6 million. This kind of needs to be updated. And in the last 50 years, we've come a long way. We used to be a city which is known as a basket case of urbanization. We were plagued with floods, diseases, unemployment, and people, a population of 2 million living in slums. Singapore is still a country, a city as well as a country. So in our small space of about 720 square kilometers, we have to serve the needs of both a nation as well as a city. We have quite a high density, 7,700 persons per square kilometers, and very limited resources. We don't have enough water or energy to sustain ourselves if not for the innovations that we have made in the last 50 years. And this is kind of what we have been plotting to make a value proposition for Singapore's brand of urbanization. If you plot a graph between urban population density and livability ranking, in this case we use Mercer's Quality of Living Survey of 2016, you can see that Singapore is one of the few cities which are both highly dense and considered highly livable. Whereas many of the cities you see in the bottom right-hand quadrant of this graph are low, dense cities. So we believe we have something we could share with other cities who aspire to be highly dense. and still livable. So a little bit about the genesis for my center, Center for Livable Cities, for which I'm the Director of Research. We were formed in 2008 as one of the outcomes of the Sustainable Singapore Blueprint. One of the initiatives that we have, in other words, our mission is to distill, create, and share knowledge on livable and sustainable cities. So a lot of the work that we do is to distill and deepen knowledge on livable and sustainable cities, and we have created quite a lot of partnership programs with international organizations, academic institutions, as well as industry and other entities who deal with knowledge. And we do quite a few things. Besides research, we conduct capability development programs for mayors and city leaders. We have an advisory program that is taking off, and we do have many knowledge platforms which I'll introduce in a bit. So this is how we work. We work with 23 stakeholder agencies in Singapore, and we also partner with many academic institutions, international companies, and international organizations. And we try to bring the knowledge from both realms together. And from a lot of the research we did on Singapore's urbanization trajectory, we found that the idea of a very integrated form of planning, as well as a dynamic system of urban governance, underlie a lot of the outcomes that we have been looking at for livable cities. And these are some of our knowledge platforms. If you go to our website, they are all downloadable for free. We have a series called Urban System Studies, where we map Singapore's urbanization trajectory on a sectoral basis, like water, planning, tourism, transportation, and so on. And we have a bi-yearly journal, Urban Solutions. We publish ad hoc books based on research we do jointly with research institutes like the Seoul Institute, the Urban Land Institute, and so on. And we have a very lively CLC lecture program, for which I've invited Peter to speak, and we're honored to have him. Our research approach, in order to be robust, we often conduct multi-stakeholder workshops. We do a lot of scans of international examples. We also have a visiting fellow program where we try to get experts to share their knowledge with us, as well as for us to share our experience with these experts. We try to bring our research onto a real level by doing test beds and pilots and research on very specific sites. So it's very much a 3P collaboration process in research. So I'll just share with you some of the current projects we are doing, which my research was on public space, so it came in quite handy in how we are reimagining some of the downtown and heartland spaces in Singapore. And we noted that our premier retail street, Orchard Road, was seeing a lot of vacancy, a decline in retail, a need to rethink how people would come to Orchard Road. And in the heartlands, we are looking at what could be done for aging new towns where the population has grown, and some of the facilities that were originally provided are no longer enough. So again, as I shared, we do a lot of workshops, getting ideas from experts and site studies. That's Peter there. Okay, and then we looked at Orchard Road, and we wanted to reimagine this, but at the same time, we worked very closely with our partner agencies like the Urban Redevelopment Authority and the Land Transport Authority to find alternative routes for traffic and how we could possibly think of Orchard Road as a pedestrianized garden space rather than currently heavily trafficked, vehicular trafficked road. And for Tampines, the Heartland case we are looking at, we conducted many workshops and we realized that we have to work on these 3 layers, introducing active mobility like walking, cycling, to the spaces that are previously car-oriented, creating more community spaces, and drawing from our assets of blue and green to enhance the livability of the public spaces in this new towns. So this shows the kind of connectivity we're looking at for walking and cycling. And turning spaces into more community-oriented and livable spaces. And for the whole of Singapore, we're actually looking at car-light urban mobility, how to turn Singapore from a car-loving city to one that is car-light and very much less dependent on the private car. And we have done research with the Urban Land Institute to get 10 ideas of how to do this. I won't go through them, but you can download the book, as I said, from our website. So some of the initiatives include encouraging walking and cycling. Developers now have to submit a walking and cycling plan when proposing new developments in Singapore. And we have also designated car-free zones all around the city to let people experience the street as a public space rather than just a thoroughfare. And many of our research platforms included the Visiting Fellows program, which I mentioned earlier. Some of you could potentially be our Visiting Fellows. We also have started a postdoctoral fellowship program. We welcome new DDes graduates to come and spend a year at CLC. You'll be very well paid. And then we also introduce, we have a very lively student internship and fellowship program, so those who are not graduating yet, you may want to spend your summer with us in Singapore. It's nice. It doesn't rain like this in the cold weather as in Cambridge. And Peter is still very much my mentor. We are actually working with him on a book tentatively titled A City in Blue and Green, the Singapore story about how we have integrated green and blue infrastructure in our planning. So we have moved from the starting point of being a garden city to a city in the garden to a city of gardens and water, and finally, in the new iteration that we are pitching for, a city in nature. So to understand how natural processes could enhance city living. That's the last slide I have. Thank you, and do visit us on our website. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. He. Our next speaker is Colonel Christopher Castle. He's the Deputy Director of the TRICARE Regional Offices for the Defense Health Agency, where he oversees the acquisition and delivery of healthcare services for the U.S. military. His nearly 30 years of service started in planning, design, construction, and operation of military healthcare environments that sustain and care for service members on and off the battlefield. Later, he served as a healthcare executive and leader for strategy, planning, program, and portfolio management, advancing military healthcare capabilities. Colonel Castle directed capital planning for medical base realignments and closures at the Pentagon and has been project manager for planning, design, construction, and operations of numerous hospitals and medical research facilities. He served as the commander/CEO of the Surgical Center at Fort Meade and later the Dwight David Eisenhower Army Medical Center in Fort Gordon. He deployed in support of Operation Enduring Freedom as the Senior Medical Advisor to the Intermediate Joint Command, International Security Assistance Forces, Kabul, Afghanistan, where he led planning of healthcare operations for 130,000 coalition forces, including combat casualty care and evacuation of wounded through care in Afghanistan to the United States. In addition to his DDes degree, he earned a BS and MS in architecture at the University of Michigan and an MS in strategic studies at the U.S. Army War College. I can't resist adding that Colonel Castle has top secret security clearance. But since we do not, you'll notice that his PowerPoint today is marked not classified. I'm tempted to add that to my lectures. Finally, Colonel Castle was awarded the Bronze Star Medal for meritorious service in a combat zone. Thank you for your service and for joining us today, Colonel Castle.
I think that's the best introduction I've ever written for myself. Thank you. Well, maybe just a little bit of background on where I fit in the pecking order. I'm going to try to hit the time marks on my presentation here. I've done it in as little as 5 and as much as 12. But out of 1.4 million people in uniform in the United States military forces, I am a colonel, and there's only about 850 people on the planet that can give me a legitimate order. So I will try to follow instructions where I see fit. This briefing is unclassified, and oh, by the way, it's a briefing in our parlance, not a talk, not a discussion, not a lecture. And these are my own personal views and not those of my agency, which has caused me some problems because my views are often personal and not the views of my agency. But good morning. I think it is still morning. No, it's afternoon already. It so happens that it's also my 30th anniversary, 30 years in uniform and service of the United States Army. I'm retiring this summer, and on to my next design problem. I also bring you greetings from Colonel Retired Tom Kermel, DDes, I think 92. He's doing well in DC and sends you his regards. Also, my regards to Spiro Palalis and Dan Shodek, who were both my advisors, Michelle Addington, who helped a great deal. It's a great honor to be here among such august company. It always has been. I studied here 17 years ago with a lot of great talent that assembles here every year from around the world. And I have to say that I was trying to not pay attention to some of these talks before me to prepare my mind for this, but I find it riveting. Everything that you say is just so fascinating, and I'm just proud to be in your company. I'm also proud to have worn the uniform of my nation for 30 years. Both of those, my trip to Harvard in the first place was a gift from the Army, and the rest of it is a gift from you. Thank you. I think we can all agree that Peter did indeed give us a stirring and stimulating, if nerdy, talk last night. What I hope to do here is a presentation that is the antithesis. It will be a stirring and completely anti-nerdy talk. But I think I thought of this sort of late. It should have been in the slide someplace, but does everybody know the Apple golden circle? Is there how they design? There's 3 rings to it. The first, the center of it is why. Then the next question is how, and the last question is what. So this is a reflection on why I design and why design is important. And I was also struck by a remark that Ty Austin made earlier in a question. He asked about design activism and why he had not heard it exactly spoken, but I'd say that everyone I've heard so far is a design activist in some fashion. And much of the work that I've heard speaks to social and economic justice. So I would say that we're all activists of a sort. And then the other thing that's going to happen here is I'm used to saying slide, and some lieutenant flips the slide. So when the slide doesn't flip, slide. So why not start with a quote from General Powell? Leadership is the art of accomplishing more than science of management says is possible. I just say substitute design in there for leadership. It reads the same. And I will tell you from my perspective, design and leadership are fraternal twins. Peter reminded us last night, and others have since, that the DDes program was founded 30 years ago with a purpose for preparing leaders, and it has. So I want to share with you some thoughts on how the military thinks about design and leadership. It's a 2-part talk. Part 1, I will very briefly summarize the mission of the military medical system, and part 2, I'd like to introduce you to my client. I have not lost my place, only lost my voice for a second. This is what happens to me when I talk about my client. If you understand those two things, you'll understand why it was important for me to come to the GSD 17 years ago, and why I have devoted 30 years of my life to this super interesting, super important, and super wicked problem set. To borrow a phrase from Peter again, me and my fellow soldiers are at the same time both enthralled and enslaved, or maybe indentured, to this problem. So, slide. That's what the military thinks about design. We actually have design doctrine. It's designing of operations. I'll let you read that for a second. And I won't linger, and we can talk about this later, about how this is design or not design of the kind we think of. But military leaders at every level are called upon to visualize, describe, and direct. To visualize their current state, to visualize the desired end state, and describe it to their team so their team can then make it so. To Ivan, I'd say, you know, we have all enjoyed an email or two, a critique of our progress. In my business, the critique of our plan, of our design, is a counterattack. And then you find out how good your design is. And we say in the military that no plan survives first contact, because the enemy gets a vote. And I'd ask you just to think about your world and think about if at every step of the way someone had a counterattack for your designs. And they do, intellectually. But think about it in more physical terms. You learn from your mistakes and you iterate, as was said earlier. So slide. This is the military health system that I've been designing from the very bottom to the top, from the foxhole to home. This is the mission set. I'll take you from the far right-hand corner. Top, a troop gets wounded in battle. A combat medic is at his or her side performing first aid. A helicopter arrives in minutes, and it takes him to forward surgical facilities. First surgery saves life and limb. He's evacuated further to higher levels of care and more advanced surgery to repair damage. Then to Germany for restorative surgery, then to the United States for rehabilitation in the Army, the military's 1,200 medical facilities and 1,700 Veterans Administration facilities around the country. That is the mission. I've been involved with design, planning, implementation, and management of those things for 30 years. That's my client. He's the center of everything that we do. He is the why. This photo is from early in the Iraq War. The 178th Parachute Regiment jumped into northern Iraq. And whether or not you agree with any particular war, you have to admire this guy. So what do you see? First of all, he's obviously carrying a lot. 100 pounds, 80 pounds is pretty standard. He jumped out of an aircraft wearing that. It's morning. How do you know? His night vision goggles are still down. His knees, elbows, boots are wet. The dew is still on the grass. He's been moving all night, and he spent a lot of that time on the ground. He's marching to his objective. He's taken a knee to catch his breath, but in a few moments he'll be up and moving. Soon he will rise. And what you see in this picture, what I see in this picture, is skill, strength, courage, determination, sacrifice, resilience, and about 100 other things. He never acts alone. He's part of a team. That's my team. Everything we do, every system we adopt, every organization we build, every hospital we design serves one purpose, and that's to get him to the fight, to win, and to return him home in one piece. Or her, let me say. Blast-resistant vehicles, body armor, combat medic simulation centers that allow combat medics to do emergency medicine under the most extreme circumstances, new tourniquets, quick clot bandages, synthetic blood products, an entire combat casualty care system I showed you 2 slides ago. It's my mission in a nutshell to protect, sustain, restore, and build resilience for the health of this team so they can do their job. And these are the people who have dedicated themselves actually to this and essentially donate themselves to the world's most difficult problems, who allow us, as Antoine said of some other topic earlier this morning, to observe the problem from a comfortable distance. We've made every one of them a promise that if they get hurt, we'll move heaven and earth. Literally. Life and limbs at stake, every second counts. That's a medevac helicopter coming to get an injured soldier. How we move heaven and earth. This is a system of systems. This is just one little piece. This is an integrated, holistic, modular design designed around the mission and men and materiel. It's part of an ecosystem. Configured properly, in the upper left, it can take me and 300 of my friends to Afghanistan. The far right, that's 4 medevac helicopters disgorging, medevac helicopters that were loaded in Texas, flown to Maine, then Germany, then Kandahar, then unloaded, then unfolded, then tested and flown into battle to save life and limb. Lower left is a flying hospital. It's an ICU, fully staffed, fully equipped in the belly of the C-17 heavy lift aircraft. And to the right of that are 2 humanitarian missions, one to ferry Haiti earthquake victims and one to deliver aid to the Yazidi people besieged by ISIS in Iraq. So it's design of a sort. It's all modular. It's all built around that singular purpose. And so what drives these troops forward? And I would say we've talked about culture a little bit. It is a culture. These troops have made 4 simple promises they make to themselves, their battle buddies, and to the rest of us. Right button. Mission first. Above self, above family, above friends, above comfort. They don't get rich. There's no $14 million bonus or stock options. They sleep on the ground in dangerous places. Never accept defeat. Not in the face of a superior force when all seems lost. This is Katrina and the valiant and obviously vain efforts of the military, air crews, and engineers dropping 5,000-pound sandbags into the gaping levee breach at Bel Chasse. It didn't work. That didn't stop them. Never quit. Your grandfather didn't. Generations haven't. Your father didn't. That's Maya Lim's beautiful design of a Vietnam War memorial that's meant more than you know to so many. You're sure as hell not going to quit because there's a lot that depends on you. You never leave a fallen comrade. Never. If a wounded troop cries out, or their family, the entire military medical system responds, from battlefield to Walter Reed Army Medical Center to the Veterans Administration facilities across the country. This is another set of promises that we've made them. The top is from Abraham Lincoln. It's the motto of the Veterans Administration. Other more lengthy promises basically boil down to we're going to design and provide the very best facilities for these troops and their families. Every one of them is a unique and unprecedented opportunity to create a patient-centered environment that empowers troops and their families to heal, stay well, and be resilient. A couple of pictures of great facilities we've been designing and delivering over the last couple of years. I'll only mention the one in the top middle. That's at the Intrepid Center in San Antonio. It's a rehabilitation facility, and that's a flow rider wave pool and a triple amputee surfing. Never quit. So, in closing, a little bit As I opened with Colin Powell, I'll close with Colin Powell. It's not organizations or plans or theories that really accomplish things. It's the endeavors of people. And you have to attract the very best people to accomplish great things. The best people that are humble and transparent, that are not about themselves but about the team, and with deeply good motives, activists. So what matters to you? And what is at the center of your Apple design ring? Why? I'll just mention one other thing before I go on to my very last slide. And I saw, you may have seen this last week or the week before, there was a young student that was admitted to Stanford recently. His essay, the prompt was, "What matters to you?" And he wrote in the space provided 100 times, "Black Lives Matter." He felt that the entire process had not allowed him to speak about what really mattered to him, and there he did and was admitted, and he'll do quite well, I'm sure. So what matters to us, why we design, that's what I've been doing for 30 years. I welcome your help. You're all brilliant people, and I'll gather as many business cards and press you into service. I want you to adopt my mission, my troops, my problems, and help me solve them. Bring fresh perspective. We're always interested in what the academia and public and private sectors can bring to this wicked problem. Thanks.
Well, I'm sure you're all anxious to get on to the question and answer session. So let me introduce our moderator. Jose Gomez Ibanez, Tony, is the Derek C. Bach Professor of Urban Planning and Public Policy at Harvard University, where he holds a joint appointment at the John F. Kennedy School of Government and the Graduate School of Design. He teaches courses in economics, infrastructure, and transportation policy in both schools. Thank you, Tony.
I can hardly speak. Well, what's impressive, for it is the variety of things that people do with their doctor design degree, and particularly the four that we've heard from in the public sector. Different interpretations of design. But what I'd like to go back to, because I think it's important in this context and understanding the lives of the people that we've just met, is Antoine's discussion of what the difference is between a PhD and a DDes, a topic of constant discussion at the GSD, and particularly in the early years of the program when I was the director. I think Antoine was right when he said you should think of the DDes as an experimental PhD, that it's problem-oriented, that it's normative. And I think it's hard to underestimate the importance of that distinction. I come from an academic discipline which has a very rigid notion of what a doctoral dissertation ought to look like. There ought to be 3 essays, each of them designed to be published in a refereed journal, and at least one of the essays has to have a lot of statistics in it that you can demonstrate that you're an accomplished econometrician. It means that the people in that discipline focus more on finding a good data set than finding an interesting problem, right? Because they're going to be judged by how well they can manipulate that data set. I mean, in the doctor design is exactly the opposite. My experience with the doctor design is that people start with a problem that they want to, and that's why often there are those embarrassing moments when an advisor like me tells Sue that I'm not sure how to proceed from here on, because there is no charted path. And I think that means that you get this variety of people, that we attract this variety of people there. They tend to be older, especially in the early days when I was more deeply involved with the program. The 2-year deadline was considered serious requirement, although never really honored. I think no one actually graduated in 2 years. But it meant that you had older people coming who already had a background in some a professional degree or a degree in some related field, and for whom the 2 years was a valuable attribution, right? A valuable characteristic, because they were older and they wouldn't have to spend 6 years earning a PhD or whatever the normal was. It also meant that they were really open-minded about the topics that they would pick, and that our faculty turned out to be open-minded as well. And that accounts for the variety that you see here, particularly in the public sector side, but also in the first panel of the morning, the variety of things that people did. And I would argue that this openness to topic, this willingness to consider different ideas, this not being bound by a convention about what the dissertation is supposed to look like from a Faculty of Arts and Sciences department's point of view, meant that this is really kind of a perfect doctorate for public sector service. I also think that Martin's Bechtold's numbers are probably wrong, or at least that you might want to count them in a different way. And with all due respect, I wouldn't be very surprised if it was really 14 out of 180 that were in the government service of one way or another. I think particularly if you look at the academics that that have their doctorate of design degree, that many of them are actually functioning as government advisors as well. I mean, Zhu, for example, teaches at the Fulbright School of Economics in Ho Chi Minh City, but he's also a top advisor to the mayor of Ho Chi Minh City. And my sense is that if you look at the public service that others are doing as well, that you would classify many more jobs as being in the public sector. But again, I am reminded of the value of this program by today. I mean, particularly the value of opening a possibility for doctoral research for people who are not kind of narrowly focused on a traditional discipline and willing to consider problems rather than data sets. I have enjoyed advising them as well. Thank you.
We'll be opening it up to questions. We have 15 minutes for questions, and we have microphones coming around. Do?
Okay, thank you very much. I wait for this time for a long time. So if we look at, I think, the agenda, there are one lacking theme, one here. That is, we lack up a section to reflect our to our faculty member, our professor, who are very, I think, help us a lot. So that's why I think that I want to propose that. I think two things to propose. I think maybe next time we should have a group of alumni to involve into this activity. And the second time to have the second one to have a reflection section and to thank our professor, our teacher. But I will let you know why I have that idea. 5 years ago, when Anton called me from Vietnam, he let me know that I was admitted to the DDes program, but one condition, that I have to went to the Harvard Extension School to take the pronunciation course. You know, I'm talking broken English now. Just think about that. 5 years ago, 6 years ago, it should be worse. But I think, to be honest, I think when my time here, that is the best time ever in my life. Right now I am 44. That's why. Because I think 4 people and the GSD has shaped my thing and my time here. The first one, I thank to Tony Gomez Ibanez. You see, at that time, I was about 40. But I think, and I have a lot of problem. But thanks to Tony, I don't know, maybe somebody faster than me, but I defend my dissertation in the 3rd semester. So thanks to Tommy with my condition. And the second person, I think I want to thank you a lot, that the Professor Rich Pizer. I think he and Tony in my committee, and 2 deans of the GSD. I think admire the person over there is Peter Rose, and the other one is Alan Onschuler. I know you know why. I think the foremost, I think I'm very admire them. I have 2 questions for Tony and for Peter today. The first one, when Tony, I think, became my mentor for about 10 years ago, he never get upset with me. And I think the great thing now that when I come here, I know that you know us. I think don't know where we are going to go. We go into unknown, I think, path. So that is, but I think you try to help us. You try to nurture us to proceed our goal. And the question is, how could you do it with, I think, a lot of problem with students? You always, I think, make our time here become more miserable, become more difficult. But I think maybe the best time for me here. And the question for Peter, maybe I think if we look at the presentation today, maybe you, not, if we not say the best, but I think among, the best, the most contribute to the DDes program. How could you do that for a long time with advising a lot of students? So that is my 2 questions. How could Tony, I think, keep very calm with a lot of, with a very problematic student like me, and how Peter can advise so many students to produce so many products. Thank you a lot.
Thank you for your comments. May I suggest that maybe we tackle these 2 questions over lunch? And since we have an esteemed panel here and only a few minutes left, why don't we see if there are any questions for the panel?
Hi, thank you for all your presentation. I have a question related to policy, in a sense that a lot of you talked about your clients or your who are the people, but I found that the people were not necessarily represented as much. And I'm just wondering, there's a crucial problem at the moment that designers should tackle more, I think, is the representation of voices of people who are not necessarily able to speak out, because, you know, there's kind of a top-down approach. And I'm just wondering, how could you improve that? If you look at Massport or airports, facilities are great things, but I was just traveling a couple days ago to come here, and I'm like, who is designing those waiting lines in front of the border control? I'm like, is there a designer at all for this sort of stuff? I just wanted to think, you know, I gotta volunteer at some point to solve these kind of issues, because they keep being repeated. And I'm just wondering, so in all of your work, how do you include, and how do you plan to include more and more, like the people's experiences?
So I can answer, I can take that one. That's a question that we get all the time. And the problem and the challenge is that we do not design lines. So when you go into an airport, and you know, until 5 years ago, I thought it was Massport fault too. But you know, when you go to an airport, it's not. So the lines is produced by the lack of CBP, Customer Border Protection. Customer Border Protection, it's a federal agency. And they have cuts in funds. So that means that they send less people. If you come through the airport, you'll see that there are like 15 booths open, but only 3 or 4 are staffed. So we provide the ability for the space to be utilized. But then there is something that it's out of our control, which is the staffing. In this, in the case of the line of CBP, I came 2 days ago and I went through the same things, because we are building for the customer, but there are a lot of other challenges that the passenger does not realize, which is, especially in airport, the security. But it's not only in airport. I was in Venezia just Easter Day, and I had to go through security to go to Mass, and I had to wait in line 1 hour. Now, do you think Brunelleschi designed the line? No, but the reality, we need to understand what is the reality of the situation, with whatever is happening in the world, and how we have to adapt our design to allow that to happen. In the last 2 years, we have now dogs at the airport. We have to make lines for dogs that have to sniff for people to get in. You did not have to take your shoes off, right? Now you do. So it's we are taking account of that, but there is a big there is policies, there is whatever is happening in the world that it's making, it's reducing our impact. I think the worst experience is going through security. I think it's the most frustrating experience that I have. And everybody comes to me and say, why is Massport? I said, it's not Massport. It's, we can make it nicer, but there's sometimes we get imposed the way. This is just real quick, and I don't know if...
Oh, I've got a million.
Yeah.
When you're designing hospitals, yes. Automobile manufacturers have only one customer sitting at the driver's seat. We have everybody
yes.
that walks into the facility.
Yes.
And they're all very important desires that our customers have. What we talk about these days, not just in the facility itself, but in the business process and clinical process that occupies it, is value-based design. And I made a stop over at the Harvard Business School yesterday to visit with one of the greats over there, Robert Kaplan. Anyone who runs a business of any substantial size knows his strategy map and his work in understanding what you're doing with your organization and how to create value out of it. So we have millions of interactions every day with our customers, consuming the healthcare that they get, and a lot of feedback that we try to turn back around into making a better process, but that ultimately should be informing the facility designs that we do. The Intrepid Center, the rehabilitation center I mentioned down in San Antonio, no such thing existed in the world before we built it, and it is chock full of everything that you might imagine or not imagine that someone suffering limb loss or other injuries might need to recover. So I think that we're very active in seeking the customer's voice. We're not always as good at translating that into systems that, satisfy the needs, but that's really what we're about.
What we do basically is to improve our infrastructure to receive the input from the different groups. Social media is very popular these days, from our president down to different citizens, that they all use social media. So we invest tremendous infrastructure to receive and accept and analyze these different needs from different people, and we develop a system to respond it. So that's how we do.
In my slide, I shared that in our research process, it is quite often that we conduct multi-stakeholder workshops that involve people from the agencies, from the private sector, from research sector, and from people and NGO sectors, so that there could be a conversation about how to approach certain problems, such as creating car light mobility, and how do we go about pedestrianizing Orchard Road. Also involve stakeholder workshops with retail associations, government agencies, and so on. And for the Tampines project, where we are designing for the community, we are on the verge of conducting walking conversations with people. So we walk and we hear people who walk with us on what they experience on a day-to-day basis, as well as conducting community workshops to co-create solutions together. So we hope that through all this means we have a robust way of getting inputs from the people that we do our research for.
I think we have about 3 minutes left, so maybe we have time for one more brief question.
Sorry, the scale of operations of all of you is enormous. I mean, I don't know how many zeros there are in trillions, Alvin. So, you lost me.
Isn't it?
And the United States Army, is when it's particularly presented in that very moving way, is really truly extraordinary, but huge. And Massports, deals with, shall we say, citizenry coming and going, because you're in the transport business as well as goods and services and so forth. How do you actually, in your jobs, think about scale? I mean, we heard a lot about the kind of process stuff. Scale, right? Because you're way up here in comparison to most circumstances we deal with, right? I mean, are there ways in which you train to, or you think about, or you've got from this program, or how do you think about scale? Besides Kaplan.
So I think something that was said somewhere along in the presentation is that evidence will begin to, and data will begin to inform our designs. I think the buildings have such a long sort of life cycle in their planning and design and development. It's hard to keep up with the kinds of things that you have to be able to understand from the data you're getting from the entire organization, and then turn that into a pilot at some level. You have to be able to rapid prototype processes in the buildings that support them, and be able to understand your costs and clinical outcomes and all of that, and test it and see if you can scale it. So you're either going to extend it to study it a little bit longer, expand it rapidly, or extinguish it, make a mistake fast and move on. But that's largely what I've been doing in the last probably 6 years, is working at an enterprise level for 10 million beneficiaries, patients, and trying to understand how you operate more uniformly. One of the things that was talked about was lean construction, and there's also lean process design, and Six Sigma is about process variation. Six Sigma is like 1 part in 16 million or something. So you're also looking for unwarranted variations in performance, because when you have a variation in a process that we use to provide daily health care across 10 million beneficiaries, you get a lot of phone calls. And in my business, they all call their congressman. So that's it. It's being able to more and more rapidly analyze large quantities of data, evaluate it, test a hypothesis, and scale it.
Scale grow by the age, by the times. This all came back to the discipline that I learned from design. As I mentioned, I didn't know anything about the sketches. The design basically is to understand the scope of the vision. First, you design a house for someone. You have to understand the big picture. What does the house look like? What the function looks like? So that's how we look at our system. We look at how the country would need, and we need to know how many people we need to serve, how much need that is needed. Then we analyze how can we get the resources to support this kind of needs. So let's try to start from a framework design, understand the big picture, and also looking at the the future, the growth of the country, the growth of the demands of those things. So we build infrastructure, technology, and the personnel to support the scale. So it came back to the very well trained over here about all kinds of disciplines that when you do the design work, you start with the vision, big picture, then you go into actually very, very details. So we have very single item of a database we have, and it's transparent to people, the government, that when you develop a huge system and spend a lot of money, you need to have the trust of the people. In order to build a trust, you have to be very transparent. You have to have the technology infrastructure to show that your decision-making, your design for the future, you allocate the money for taxpayers, from the taxpayers, that there's a justification. So the design concept basically help us to scale up continuously.
Well, unfortunately, we are out of time, so I'm hoping that we can continue this conversation over lunch. Let's have another thank you for our panel and our speakers.